I hope you guys have had a great time on the morning breakouts, during our lunchtime keynote, and our afternoon breakout. And this afternoon, we have an awesome plenary planned for you. So while we know that state agencies can provide much needed resource and expertise in areas of health and transportation, we also realize that there's needs for additional leadership and policy efforts, and they're critical to help set vision and prioritize active transportation across all levels of government. We've assembled today a prestigious panel of policy trailblazers to discuss the efforts that they are working on to advance walking and biking in our own communities. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. So come on up. Yeah, make your way to the stage. And we have, this panel is going to be facilitated by Heather Barsky, so go ahead.
Well, thank you so much. Very good. It's such a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and I'm so glad that so many of you have stuck around after this very long, amazing day. I'm really excited for this panel. So we had a preliminary meeting about a week or so ago to get ready for this, and my three thoughts were, wow, our panelists are amazing. You're going to learn a lot from them, and this hour is going to go by really, really fast. I'm also really excited. I love when a conference wraps up with a nice tidy bow and when the last session really serves to reinforce and kind of cap all the key messages that you've been hearing throughout the day today. And I really think this panel will do that. So for the sake of time, I'll just briefly introduce our panelists, and then I'll let them more fully introduce themselves as we get into some of the questions. First, I'd like to introduce Representative Suzanne Harrison. She's a physician and anesthesiologist and also serves as a state representative in the legislature representing District 32, which is the Draper area. Next to her is Kent Millington, a businessman and is a member of the Board of Trustees for the Utah Transit Authority. And then lastly, but not least, Mayor Troy Walker is an attorney and is the mayor of Draper City. My name is Heather Barsky. I direct the Division of Disease Control and Prevention at the Utah Department of Health. And the Utah Department of Health is really thrilled to be here today to participate in this conference for this simple reason: transportation policy is health policy. We cannot do our work as public health professionals without the support of the transportation sector. And I would argue that the opposite is true, that the transportation sector is better when public health is involved. When you think about active transportation policy specifically, we've been hearing this all day, that there are beneficial impacts of active transportation policy in many, many sectors. In transportation, it's another efficient option to move people from point A to point B. For cities, it helps foster safe communities, safe streets. We heard Carlos Braceras talk about the city of our dreams, and we heard Jason Roberts talk about vibrant neighborhoods. Active transportation is key. Schools, it helps get kids to school safely and in active ways. In economic development, it creates diverse transportation options that attracts new business and tourism. And for health, it helps people be physically active and it improves air quality. I want to touch just a little bit on physical activity. Being physically active is one of the single best things you can do for your health. And sadly, about half of us, only about half of us, get enough physical activity, and nearly 20% of adults get no physical activity at all during the day. When we in health think about physical activity, our goal is actually the same as how I would guess the transportation sector would define it: to connect people to places and improve quality of life. So we're using the same language. Our message in public health isn't go to the gym, it's move more. Move more by walking to the bus stop, by walking to local stores, by riding your bike to school. And active transportation plays a key role in making physical activity easier by building it into everyday life through trails, through sidewalk improvements, through first and last mile infrastructure. So I'm really excited about today's panel because you'll hear about these ideas and more. And I will transition down to my seat. So I just wanted to start with an opening question for each of our panelists. And that is, please describe your work and how your work involves active transportation. And Dr. Harrison, would you like to start?
Well, I wear a couple different hats work-wise, but in my normal day job, I chase 3 monkeys at home, and I'm a practicing physician anesthesiologist and ran for the legislature and ended up winning this past election. So I serve representing Sandy Draper area, and I feel like those different hats kind of coalesce into this legislation that I worked on most recently. But I think, and all of you are the experts in this, but we have to figure out ways to stop siloing, health, transportation, education. I feel like all of these things interact, and finding ways to get people where they need to go, whether it's for school or work or what have you. We got to get more creative about that, and active transportation, I think, really is key. I live in Draper, so I'm very honored to be on this panel with the mayor of my city, and we chose to live in Draper because of many of the active transportation options there. We're all little mountain biking family. We got a couple kids on the local mountain biking team, minus one because of a broken collarbone a week ago, which is sad. But anyway, I think these things are important to Utahns, and we need to make sure that we're maximizing opportunities to get people where they need to go without just relying on cars.
Well, we're very concerned at UTA about getting people from their homes to the platform or the station where they can take either a bus or a train. And so that becomes a real issue for us. And the ability for you and other citizens to get from your home to a train station or a bus station, a bus stop, some way, that becomes a real important issue for us. Because we understand, too, that moving around in mass transit also requires that we walk a little bit. For a number of years, I used to live in Tokyo, and the least that I would walk when I lived in Tokyo was about 5 miles a day. And yet I never owned a car there in Tokyo, used public transit all the time, and felt great because I was moving, I was walking. I wasn't riding a bicycle. Heaven forbid they take training wheels off at my age. But being able to move around and to move you around is something that we're really working hard at doing. So we're very anxious to be able to provide the kinds of things, and I'll mention a few of them later, but we're anxious to provide the kinds of mobility that will not only contribute to your health, but contribute to your better life.
Well, thank you. It's always great to come and speak a little bit about some of the things we're doing in our municipality to improve active transportation, give people options. If you've been out, how many of you have been out to Corner Canyon before? And let's see. All right, very good. I do want to underscore that you do use those trails at your own risk. So if you break something, you just make sure you're insured. So if you've been out there and ridden them or hiked them or ridden a horse on them, you know that we've spent a lot of money on what would probably be, by a lot of people's standards, recreational type trails. We also, you may not be aware in Draper, we've spent a considerable amount of money on paved trails as well. We have a big trail called the Porter Rockwell Trail, which leaves our main Draper City Park near our city hall and goes all the way out to the point of the mountain. And shortly, when Lehigh connects their portion, we'll go all the way into Lehigh and ultimately connect with the Murdoch Canal Trail. So you'll be able to get on that paved trail. We just connected our front runner site over where eBay is, if you've been over there. We just connected it a few weeks ago with the Jordan River Trail. So you can ride down the Jordan River Trail if you work at eBay and one of those other companies there. You could ride your bike to work now and come right across the bridge we just put in and totally get back and forth to work on a bicycle or a scooter or on your feet. And so our goal as a city is one of the things we try to do, we're cognizant of the need for paved trail surface that people can use to commute on. In addition to that, whenever we build a new road, we put a bike lane on the road. So if we're reconstructing a road, and you can come see the ones we've reconstructed in the last 5-6 years, they all have shoulder and a safe, proper constituted bike lane. That's a couple of the things that we're doing as a city to continue to improve active transportation and hopefully motivate people to get out of their cars.
Excellent. Thank you so much. See, we're already off to an awesome start. Next question for each of the panelists again. What role does or should biking and walking play in Utah's transportation system? Who would like to go first? Mayor, would you like to take a stab at that? We'll go the opposite direction.
Absolutely. A few years ago, when I served on the UTA Board of Trustees, I went on a tour to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and it was an active transportation tour. It was one of the Revolution tours, but we did the bike tour, and I was amazed at the level of commuting that occurs even in that place where it gets a lot colder than here. As we talked to the people as we did the bike tour, they talked about how people used bikes to get around, and they plowed the trail before they plowed the roads. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So we now, when it snows, we have a crew that goes out and plows our trail almost simultaneously to the road, so that if you are using that trail, you could get around, right after a snowstorm. But I think that as we look at the future, you've all driven on I-15, and when we leave this conference, it'll be a parking lot going back. I think the advent of e-bikes, I like biking, and so I'm going to talk about those for a minute. I just bought one, by the way, so I may be a little bit biased. But I think the technology and the opportunity for people to use a bike that's pedal assist is really revolutionary, especially as the prices continue to go down and the technology continues to get better. You can buy a bike for under $3,000 that you can count on to deliver you at up to 28 miles per hour for over 100 miles. That's a reality now. It used to be those bikes were $6,000 or $7,000. Now they're down below $3,000. There are people that are replacing their cars, but they can't replace their car with a bike like that unless there's a way to get there safely, because it's probably the most dangerous thing you can do is ride on the road with the texting. So it's our goal to provide the safer bike lanes and to provide the paved bike trail and walking trail, so that you can say, okay, I can get to the train, I can maybe ride my bike there, or I can park close and walk. So our goal is always to find ways to give people an alternate way to get around. And so as we continue to develop the more dense transit-oriented development sites like at Front Runner and our track stops, our goal is to make it so you have a way to maybe leave your car home for a week, all week, or be able to commute just on a bike or a scooter, like I said, or even walk. So.
We would like to see more of you on our trains and buses. So walking and biking is very important to us because that provides you an opportunity to go from your home to one of our stations or bus stops. And so walking and biking is certainly part of the active and very viable transportation opportunities that we have here in the state of Utah. At UTA, we're very concerned about people's safety. And so many of the things that we do in conjunction with UDOT is to make sure that roads and paths and bike trails and walking trails are available and clean and safe for you to get to where you can then ride UTA in some fashion. So those are the kinds of things that we're very interested in. I'm sure another question will give me an opportunity to explain to you some of the things we've actually spent a lot of money on recently. But we're very interested in being able to promote the walking and biking, the good, healthy way of getting around town.
And I'll just follow up with I think as I'm serving in the legislature, I'm always interested in budget. Like, where are we spending our money, and does it reflect what we're talking about, what our values are, or what we say our values are? And I think this is an opportunity for huge growth in terms of really supporting active transportation. And I just met with the governor a couple of weeks ago, asking him to try and prioritize some funding in his budget for the legislation I worked on this past year, the Safe Routes to School bill, because we really need to get people out of their cars. It's healthy for all of us. It's healthy for, adults and kids. We're not moving enough. The medical evidence is really clear on that. And we got to get to where we need to go in healthier ways. And just to let you know, sir, my 15-year-old this summer got to and from work and this summer school program with a bike and his UTA pass. So
Good.
And we need to invest in these, infrastructure to make sure our kids and hopefully many, many, many more adults are getting there safely with safe bike lanes, sidewalk infrastructure, and pedestrian infrastructure, and so that we're not just prioritizing roads.
I have a question for Mayor Walker specifically. Could you talk a little bit about the Draper experience? What kinds of partners have you worked with to improve walking and biking in your community? What policy levers have you pushed to improve active transportation in your community? So if you could just talk about your city experience.
Thank you. We work closely with the Wasatch Front Regional Council. I would say that's probably our most significant partner with respect to sort of general planning and the concepts of how to make active transportation a thing. I'm on the Active Transportation Committee as part of the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and they do a phenomenal job of kind of high-level planning. And right now, we're right now in our city, we're working on an active transportation plan. So we're actually in the process of putting it together, and it'll be an official document that we'll use in planning and development going forward. So working with them, we also work with MAG, which is our partner. Our city occupies 2 counties. We're one of the few that does. We spill over into Utah County. So we work with our MPO groups. We also work with the developers, quite frankly. The developers are interested now in creating these walkable type situations, and they want to contribute to trails. I think 4 or 5 of our last developments, the developers, they want to be a partner in building the trails. They want to contribute to it, and so that's an important thing to approach. If your municipality is doing development like all of them are, incorporating and requiring them to make trail building or access to trails part of their development plan, I think is a key, and we've been successful in that. We have a great big employer that's building their new world headquarters. You may have heard of them, Pluricite, that they're building a brand new facility, and it was important to them the spot they picked. It's right in front of the Port of Rockwell Trail. It's also close to what will ultimately be a light rail stop, I hope. No pressure for him. Or bus rapid transit, whatever. Put him on the spot. But you watch these employers, a lot of the tech companies, it's important to their employees, it's important to be able to have a different way to get to work or to be able to recreate. So those are some of the things we've done is we get with Wasatch Front, they help us with the plan, they've helped us with some funding and ways to get grants to improve and build some of the different things that we've done. But the business community is who connected the Front Runner site with the Jordan River Trail. That was part of their obligation, and it's been great for them. So that's sort of some of the things we do.
Excellent. Wanted to turn to Kent now. We talked a little bit about this past week when we were preparing for this panel, but you've seen a lot in your transportation career. Can you talk a little bit about how your views have evolved over time regarding active transportation?
Yeah, I did not like active transportation a decade and a half ago. I was not a proponent, even though I had just come back from living in Japan, and I travel to China frequently, and so there's a lot of bicycles there. But I was not a proponent. However, I was appointed to the State Transportation Commission, and from 2005 to 2018, I was a member of the Transportation Commission and chairman of the commission the last 3 years I was there. And during that period of time, there was an emerging emphasis on active transportation. And I kept hearing about it, I kept opposing it, I kept saying, why are we spending money when we're building roads? Let's build roads. Why are we building bike lanes? And it became clear to me over that period of time that there was a need to provide safe passage for those that wanted to ride bikes. Okay, so I didn't, but why was I imposing on everybody else my belief or my thinking? And so I began to understand, as we built roads with bike lanes and trails and other things that we were building as we were building roads, it became very clear to me that they were very useful for the community, not just in terms of health, but in terms of commuting, in terms of transportation. And so I'm frankly kind of a recent convert to this whole idea. The last and I will admit it, because people from UDOT will clearly tell you that several years ago I was not a fan, but I have turned in to be one because of the beneficial impact that I have seen it have on people's ability to recreate, to commute, and to just enjoy family time together. And so I've kind of gotten on the bandwagon here and promoted some things. Let me explain to you a few things that UTA has done recently. A little while ago, a couple of years ago, we got what is called a Tiger Grant for $20 million. We added $12 million to that of local matching funds from us, and got this $32 million, and it was specifically for first and last mile kinds of things: improving bus stops, improving stations, improving trails, getting bridges over busy thoroughfares, making it possible for people to walk and bike or scooter or whatever means there is to get from where they wanted to go. And so we have now completed, of the 160 projects that we initially proposed, we have completed 90 of them. We have spent just over $15 million of that 32 on those 90 projects. And they're specifically to assist in the first and last mile kinds of active transportation support to make things safer. Now, we've got 3 big projects that are still remaining. There's a bridge over SR 92 in Lehigh that will help connect these trails that the mayor was talking about, so that you could actually start in Provo Canyon and wind up at the Great Salt Lake eventually. But we're building that bridge over SR 92. Any of you who drive through that area will know that that's under construction again right now, the roadway, and when they get that all done, then we can figure out and design this bridge. There's a bridge at the Provo Frontrunner station that goes over the railroad tracks and connects the city to the Frontrunner station on the south side of the city. And then the most hazardous roadway is the one on 3rd North right by West High School. That's a real problem because Union Pacific trains will pull across the train tracks and stop. And kids are trying to get to school early in the morning. And so kids will then jump through the rail cars on their way to school because they get docked if they're late for school, and the train is stopped. Now, we don't have to think too hard to realize how dangerous that is. So one of our priorities is to get a bridge over there so kids that are walking to school can get there and be safe. And those are the kinds of projects that we're working on to support this very active lifestyle that we are encouraging. And so we're very much interested in that. We're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're hopeful that we can get these bridges built, as we've built several others in the past, and improve these first and last mile access.
Thank you. And I guess I'd like to open this question up to our other 2 panelists. If you have anything to add about how your own personal views have changed, or perhaps how either your municipality's views or the state legislature's views have changed over time, if either of you have anything to add. If not, that's okay. I just wanted to open it up. Nothing else to add? Okay, very good. Want to ask Representative Harrison to talk a little bit about the Safe Routes to School bill that passed this past session. I think that was an amazing piece of legislation to come through. Can you talk a little bit about why you were a champion for it, what you did to get it passed, etc.
Sure, thank you. So I think the reason it resonated with me was I'm a mom of 3 kids in our local public schools, and I feel passionate that we need to get our kids moving more. There's all sorts of evidence that kids that move, and I'm preaching to the choir here, you all know this, kids that move get enough exercise. Not only are there academic benefits, there's also mental health benefits, there's behavioral benefits, and this has been borne out by studies to back it up. And it's just a fact of life. We gotta have our kids moving more to be healthy. And I also am passionate about air quality. There's not many things that can both decrease local traffic congestion, help our kids learn better, have better behavior at school, and also clean up our air through fewer people making, car trips back and forth from school than just sending your kid out the door on a bike or walking to school. In Utah, the 1.5 miles around local public schools, is exempt from busing, so families are left with figuring out how to get kids to and from school. And unfortunately, every year, on average, 5 kids die in Utah getting to or from school. So the Safe Routes to School program is simply a program through UDOT, and thank you to UDOT for your work on this. It's simply a program to help improve local pedestrian infrastructure, either sidewalks that are in disrepair or non-existent, or crosswalks or traffic calming devices. And it's a cooperative program through schools, municipalities, and then UDOT. There's an application process and a review process. The bill codified this program and to ensure it continues in the future, and it also allowed for one additional consideration to be made, which is the kind of socioeconomic status of the school. I think it's critical that when we're looking at making sure kids are getting to and from school safely, that every kid is getting to and from school safely. And just because some kids grow up in an area or a municipality with fewer, tax resources or tax base than others, I think those kids still deserve to be getting to and from school safely. So it allowed UDOT to consider, the percentage of students that are, low income, qualify for free or reduced lunch payments to be an additional factor in who gets these projects awarded. Those areas that have that have had a Safe Routes to School program go in have seen reductions both in injuries and fatalities, both in adults and children. And hopefully the goal is to get more of our kids moving along the safest routes and get them to and from school safely.
Do you have other thoughts about state level policy efforts that can help improve active transportation?
Yeah, absolutely. If any of you have an in with the governor, ask him to prioritize Safe Routes to School funding in his upcoming budget, because I think this is something that we really need every organization and every level of government to be prioritizing. I appreciate our local leadership in Draper, but we need, legislative, executive branch to really get on board with this and prioritize it so that, there's muscle behind the talk about really putting money towards these things. And I think we passed a bill this year that, allocated millions upon millions of dollars for making sure our kids are safe once they're at school. But we know kids are dying trying to get to and from school. And I think this is a no-brainer on let's improve these pedestrian routes. Let's improve the infrastructure to make sure more of us are physically active getting to and from school.
Excellent, thank you. So one of the things we talk a lot about is the need to improve air quality to reduce congestion. We know that one of the most important solutions to that is driving less and using transit, yet that's really easy to say and super hard to do. What can we do to help citizens make that transition, even if it's for a few trips in their week? What are your thoughts about that? Who would like to start?
Well, I think just talking more about it is one thing, but I don't know if people maybe don't realize there is the ease with which you can commute. I think there's probably a little bit of fear factor for people who don't maybe ride bikes as part of their exercise or something, but there's plenty of opportunity if we just talk more about it as both elected officials and community leaders about the benefits of it. And I think if people are willing to try it once in a while, they might find out it's not as hard to do as they might think. Kent talked about you can get from the top of Provo Canyon to the Great Salt Lake. You can actually get from Ogden to Provo Canyon now on the Golden Spoke Trail, which as it ties into the Murdoch Canal Trail. How many of you have been on the Murdoch Canal Trail before? All right, this is an active group, of course. How many of you have been on the Golden Spoke from Ogden down? Okay, now those investments are phenomenal amount of investment. I think it's forward thinking, and it's just an incredible investment that our counties and cities have made in these trails, and we need to promote them more. A lot of people don't even know about that trail. I'll tell people about it, and they're like, really? You can get from Ogden to Salt Lake on a trail? And I'm like, yeah, you can. You can get all the way to Utah Lake and all the way to Provo Canyon. We need to promote these a little bit more. Now, we've done a pretty good job trying to, but we've invested a significant amount of money in this infrastructure, and I think we need to tie into it more. Every opportunity we get, we need to tie into it, and we need to make people aware and make it easier for people to use. I'm a big proponent of moving the prison, you may or may not know. It's something I've worked on since I was elected. And in Draper, that site's coming online. And if you think about what that means, if we develop the prison site like we've done everything else, the traffic's going to be horrible, the air quality's not going to get better. There's an opportunity here at this 700 acres to do something completely unique and not make the car the king, but maybe make active transportation the king and mass transit the king, and something like that can make a difference, get the economic benefit, but not have the impact. And so I think those things are important. We got to be bold and be willing to. It's going to take some upfront investment to change the way we do things here. More people own cars in Utah than any other place in the country. It's the highest car ownership per capita of anywhere. You can talk about clean air till you're out of air. If you don't stop driving, you'll never clean it. So that's what we got to do. We've got to be able to get people to find a different way to not use a car.
The mayor mentioned that Utah has a very high car ownership per family. Actually, it has the highest in the nation. Only 4% of the households in the state of Utah do not have a car. And that's the lowest percentage in the United States. And so to get people to move from the convenience, the habit, the tradition of just jumping in the car that's sitting there, because everybody's got at least one, in order to change that, we've really got to start shaking up our own thinking. We've got to be able to say to ourselves, don't get in that car just to drive around the corner. Is there another way to do this? Can I commute? Now, the mayor already referenced driving down I-15. When I get done, I'm going to walk out over here and get on the Blue Line and go to Murray Station and take the front runner down to Utah County where I live. So I commute every day using transit. Now, maybe you would think that's what I ought to do because I work for Utah Transit Authority. But I do it nonetheless. And we've simply got to change our thinking. Just like I had to change my thinking about active transportation, we've got to start changing our thought process about how do I get from where I live to where I work? And how do I move around? It's very convenient. I love reading history books. In the last week, I've read half of this history book on my commute. Not stuck on I-15, not frustrated because nobody's moving, but I'm on the train and I'm enjoying an excursion in this case, to Japan. But we really need to change the culture of our thinking about the automobile. And we will have here in the state of Utah an uphill slog simply because we have so many people that own automobiles. And we've got to gradually change, explain to people how they can get from point A to point B, and do so to the benefit of their health and their family.
So I'm going to tell you two stories that kind of exemplify some of the challenges, and then a third plea to any engineers out there. So the first one came to me from a family in my community that their kids loved biking to school. They were doing it actively until a few neighbors on the route that they were using along, this family asked their kids to ride on the sidewalk because they were too nervous about on the road with cars not being aware of them and the texting issue and so forth. They started getting flat tires every time they rode to or from school because one or two of the neighbors had a yard that was in disrepair, and like the little, what are those, the little burrs, the goat heads, thank you, would pop a tire every day going to or from school. And so finally the kids were like, forget this, I'm not going to ride my bike to school anymore. So that's just one little example of something that we could overcome with the proper interventions. And it seems silly, but that family, it totally changed their ability to have active transportation for their kids getting to or from school is one example. So that's, whether it's a local ordinance issue or what have you, there's things that can be tweaked to address this. Another example is from my own family. We live close to a very busy road that doesn't have a sidewalk or a bike path. And my kids always want to go down to the library. And I'm very nervous about them using that particular road to get down to the library because there's no sidewalk, there's no shoulder that I feel comfortable with how questionable sometimes their biking skills are for me to feel comfortable for them to do that. And so that's an example. Like, we got to make sure that we have roads that can also have bikers and pedestrians in mind when we're addressing any sort of update or addressing this challenge in a real way. And the third one, this is just a plea to any of you who know anyone in the bike industry. Can someone please invent a helmet for women that doesn't create that helmet head right down the middle of your head? Because I feel like that is a deterrent to women biking more to and from work. Like, I don't want to get to work and look like a complete fool with like the lines right down your head from the helmet. So anyone who has a solution to that, for those of us that don't have long enough hair for a ponytail.
I have a solution for that.
But don't want to look like an idiot. Touche. That was awesome. So I think we need to think about some of the real barriers. And I'm actually being serious. Like, I think there are some unique barriers to women really embracing this. And hair challenges are real. So fix it, all you smart people.
You know, another thing, not all cities have informed mayors like Draper does. But active people in the community can carry the message to the mayor and city council to be sure that when roads are approved or improved or approved, that they include proper bike lanes for active transportation. So it really takes all of us at our local level to be sure that we begin to emulate what Draper has given us the example for. And so carry the message back to your city council, your city mayor, that when they approve or improve roads for their city, that it have the proper design to promote active transportation.
That's an excellent point, and I'm going to put the mayor on the spot. What are your thoughts about effective ways to communicate about active transportation with municipal leaders?
Well, I think Suzanne's trying to communicate with me right now about her road. No.
I will call you, Mayor, if I have a question.
Well, one of the things that we were able to do, we have an outstanding communications consulting firm that we use. She's somewhere out there, Muriel. We recently engaged X Factor to do a community survey about what do people like, what do they want, what do they think's great, what do they think isn't so great. And it was interesting, when you're an elected official, and I know Suzanne feels this, you sometimes feel like you're just under siege all the time. Like you only hear from the people who want you dead, or worse. You never hear from the people who are usually happy. And it was interesting, this survey, almost 90% of our residents were happy with the way we're doing things. Now, we're not perfect. We have a lot of things we need to do still, but you're talking a community like Draper, when I was in high school, had about 4,000 residents in it. Now it's like 50,000. So the roads were farm roads. And so as we go along and improve them, we do put the bike lanes in, we do put the sidewalk in. But that's expensive. It's really expensive. I don't know what the price of oil is today, but a few years ago, to do 1 mile of 60-foot wide asphalt was $1 million. When oil was about $110 a barrel. And it fluctuates. But so think about how many miles can your city do a year with just B&C road funds? Not that much. So as we look at that, that's why I think it's important when developers are developing that we use the impact fees properly. And I think we are. But I think one of the great things, the survey was really enlightening to me because it talked about the things people like, and it also told us some of the things they don't. And so we're going to work on the things that they want to see improved. And I think those are useful. So encourage your city councils and mayors to do community survey and find out what people want. It's hard to know all the time what everyone wants, but I think a good statistically valid survey is a useful tool. We used it, and we're going to continue to use it. We try and engage our citizens through social media and the other ways that you do. And I think, people just have to be interested in it. And it takes a little bit of changing of our thought process to think about active transportation. But I think Suzanne's right. The health benefits are great. There's so many things that are good for it, but it also makes a difference. And I think going forward, we're gonna see people making that choice because it's going to be more efficient than trying to sit in traffic all the time. I truly believe that a good pedal assist bike is faster than traffic. If you have less than 10 miles to commute, I think you could do it faster on a pedal assist bike than you could in a car on a daily basis. And you should try it if you have. Rent one. I rented one for a week and rode it. Mine's a mountain bike, but I ride it to work. It's phenomenal what you can do. I think it's the future, and I hope that as it goes along, more people use it, and it'll be a benefit to us.
And for the record, I moved to Draper because of the awesome active transportation opportunities. And I really think this has to be a partnership at all levels of government and with all types of community organizations. It needs to be everyone coming together to support this.
I have a follow-up question for you, Representative, actually. Thinking of legislators, what types of messages resonate with them? How do we get this on their radar screen? How do we build support for active transportation with the state legislature?
So in terms of my experience with this legislation I just passed, it passed easily, but there was always that question, isn't this the city's responsibility? Isn't active transportation something that that's their jurisdiction? Why are we as the state even getting involved? And I think some of these questions, we need to question, well, why aren't we all engaged with this? And what ways could we do that better? And I think this is one of the benefits of having, turnover in elected office is to get new ideas and new takes on things. And how can we think outside the box a little bit to really support this and improve it at all levels of government?
Thank you so much. So I'm going to keep an eye on the clock and save a little time for a closing, wrapping up question, but I think we do have a few moments for audience questions. So if you have questions, please come forward, use the mics. Anyone with questions?
You got somebody running up there?
Yeah.
Haven't you guys seen The Office? Supposed to line up and, remember that until
Let's see who gets there first. I think you won out.
I made it. This question was for Kent. Is there any chance in the future of extending TRAX hours at all? By the way, big fan of TRAX, love it.
Hey, thank you very much. Extending TRAX hours?
Yes.
The hours of operation?
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have walked away. Yeah, just extending them to later hours or maybe 24 hours. I'm sure you've got that question.
Oh, we get that, and front runner on Sunday and some other kinds of questions for moving people around. And the answer to that is yes. Those are things that we have, we've only been in place, the three board members have only been in place for less than a year. But that is something that has come up repeatedly. We're very interested in being able to do that. Of course, it's all a matter of money, and we have to take that into consideration. But we are working to try to streamline the current operations wherever we can so that we can extend hours of operation. You may know that our bus service here in Salt Lake City, for example, was recently extended significantly along 2nd South, 9th South, and 21st South. That was paid for by the city of Salt Lake. So we were able to do that, and we have extended hours now. But as we look for ways to economize and make more efficient our system, then we're going to begin to look at how do we then extend longer hours to be able to service people, because it's one thing to provide service from 5 a.m. to midnight, but what about people that get off at midnight and then they have to figure out a way to get home? And that's a concern. There are some things that we're going to start trying. For example, in the southern part of the county of Salt Lake, we're going to start here shortly a micro-transit system. It's an on-call system of smaller vehicles, not buses, but smaller vehicles to reach areas that we currently do not serve. We've been in conversation with the St. Petersburg, Florida people who have that kind of a service after their regular light rail and bus system closes down to be able to offer that service. There are some things that we can do. And yes, we have that on our agenda to look at. Is it going to happen next month? No. But it is something that we are looking at. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
I think there was a question over here.
Thank you. A couple of comments first, and then a question. Just want to say, Mayor Walker, really appreciate your leadership in this area. Kent, I'm a regular front-runner commuter, and believe me, you have plenty of people on the train in the morning during commute hours where they have standing room only, which is a great thing. Right. So keep that up. And then
that's me there standing.
Yeah, exactly right. And Representative Harrison, I'm going to send you an email with a helmet alternative that might work for you, so look for that in a little bit. And I've really appreciated the conversation on sort of the evolution of thinking and gaining traction for bicycling and walking, not only as recreation, but for a way to get around, right, for utilitarian purposes. Have any of you thought or been in any conversations about one of the reasons it's hard to get people out of their cars here is because it's so convenient to drive, right, outside of commuting hours especially. And so what do we do to not only incentivize people to walk and bike, but disincentivize them, right, and make it a little bit more uncomfortable to drive regularly and more difficult to get around, because right now our system's sort of built comfort in that regard. So any thoughts you have, I would appreciate.
I think those are excellent questions. And my first thought is that all of you in this room should run for office, because I think the reason that, Draper and some of these communities that have really invested in active transportation did that because people that were in office cared about this issue. And so I think that's one way, is people that care about this and are passionate about changing the status quo need to run for office. One perfect example is, it's not directly related to bicycles, but for example, this, eliminating incentives for cleaner vehicles in Utah. I think if we had more people that valued, clean energy, cleaner vehicles, low emission ways to get around, we would have a different set of policies. So that's my plea to all of you to run for office and change the dynamic.
Last call for audience questions. Oh, please come forward.
Hello, I work in active transportation statewide, and one of the kind of biggest hurdles in getting stuff built or quality facilities built are oftentimes staff, sort of their perspectives. Because even if if an elected official wants it, they don't necessarily have the know-how So do you have any recommendations for attracting the kind of talent or perspectives that would help move this along?
Well, I think that it's encouraging to see so many people at this event. I think that's a good start. I think we're in an era now, and I can see at least a few other elected officials. The lights are on me. I feel like I'm getting interrogated, but I think that people, we reach out to experts on how to do it. We're, one of the things we do when we try to make our active transportation plan is we're talking to the people that know, the engineers and people that know how to make it work. So I think as you encourage the building of these facilities and the implementation of active transportation plans, I think just encouraging elected officials, to work to get the experts that can make it efficient and make it work. I took my wife and my oldest daughter on a trip to D.C. this last summer. We spent a week. We stayed in Crystal City, and so I told my wife and daughter, I love to bike. They don't. I said, well, the only way we're going to be able to get around is these Capital Share bikes. We got to ride them into town. And my wife's like, yeah, we're not doing that. So we did Uber the first day. And after that, after $40 and sitting in traffic, my wife's like, well, maybe we should try the bikes. I had them hooked after the first day, and we rode over 180 miles on those bikes. And my wife and daughter, it just popped in their mind, wow, this actually works. Now, DC's more friendly to cycling than here. I'm going to give you that. It seemed to me that the drivers are a little more conscientious. They're used to cyclists more maybe than we are here. But I think we need to talk about it. We've done something small in our community. Our city council just passed an idle-free ordinance, to try and encourage people. I mean, we all talk about cleaning the air, and like I said, the only way you can clean it is drive less. And so maybe the incentive to get people to drive less is we need to let them know that every time you drive the car, it contributes to the pollution problem. It's the number one contributor. There's nothing that contributes more. And so maybe just more education, more awareness, more policies, more incentives for cleaner vehicles, electric vehicles, whatever it is. I'm a bad example. I drive a truck when I practice law, so I can't commute to the different courts in one day by transit. It just doesn't work for me. But when I can, I try and use my bike to get to my work just to contribute a little bit. So I think maybe if we all do something, maybe once a week you ride to work or walk to work or ride transit, that makes a difference. And that kind of stuff, maybe you do it twice, and pretty soon the things change a little bit and it gets better.
I just have one quick addition to that, and I think we need to value the contributions of those folks that are working as public employees. I think sometimes there's a rhetoric in this state that government is the problem, but many times the solutions come from bright people that are state or municipal employees, and I think we need to change the dynamic of how we talk about government. We are government. We are what government is, and we need to recognize and champion those people that are doing it well, and acknowledge and change that conversation. And I feel very much the same way about teachers. Like, all of these folks need to be paid a competitive living wage. So thank you.
I think one of the things that will happen over the next, say, decade is that young people who are enthused about these issues of active transportation and environment will become the officials that will make the decisions. Old guys like me who didn't like active transportation will be kicked out of the way by young people who are aggressive, who want to make the change, and who run for public office. I think it's very important that young people with their very good ideas of change that's necessary in our society and in our culture run for public office so that they can be heard on local and state and national levels. And so I encourage that. Think about what's happened just this last week. I happened to be in Washington Monday and Tuesday, and we had a hard time getting around because all the streets were blocked by the demonstrators for clean air. And who started that? A young 15-year-old Swedish girl. Now, there's no reason why there couldn't be 15-year-old Harrison child out there doing some of the same things, and in 10 years be in a position to make those kinds of decisions. And so I really encourage young people with these ambitions to seek out opportunities to be heard, to run for public office, because that's where change will really happen.
So my last question actually was going to be, what is the one thought you want to leave with the audience? But I actually think this question landed us there. Really impactful closing comments, and I kind of want to hug Representative Harrison, but really appreciate all of the insights we've learned today from diverse representation, from municipalities, from state legislature, from UTA, as well as the other information we've learned all day today. Like I said, I hope this wrapped up the conference in a nice, tidy bow. I think we heard a really nice recap and reinforcement of many of the messages that we've heard all day. So really, thank you for your time. Thank you for sticking it out with us. And I think I'm turning it over for closing comments.
All right, I have wellness succulents for each of you, so just hang on for a second. This concludes our core programming for the day. Thank you so much for sticking it out with us. Right after this, we have our evening reception. It's kicking off in Ballroom C, the foyer, over to the right. Additionally, the scooter tour, sponsored by Spin, is starting out the glass doors to the right. The first 30 people will get helmets and scooters, and if you don't feel like hopping on a scooter and taking a spin, you can get your daily dose of recommended physical activity and do the short walk, and then join us at the evening reception afterwards. I think that concludes it. Our hope is that you were able to make a connection today, that you were able to connect to new information, new resources, and most importantly, connect to new people. I hope today has inspired you to be a leader and to push others to join you in advancing active transportation across the state of Utah. Together, we can build the community of our dreams. Thank you so much.